Hi, my name's John. I'm the lead pastor here at Grace Life, and welcome to this edition of our blog. We've been moving through the book of Galatians, and we went through chapter 2 Sunday, and I just wanted to recount and review a couple things, very important things on salvation. You know, the Galatians and the Jews in the region of Galatia were very confused about what it took to be saved, all right? And so if you think about this formula, salvation equals belief plus what? Paul's gospel has nothing in the blank, but the Jews, the Judaizers, the Pharisees, they were putting Old Testament law, works of the law, in the blank. And they expected Gentiles who came to faith to do the law. And part of that was circumcision, and part of that was wearing tassels, and part of that was eating kosher, and 613 other things, right? And so that was difficult for them, and the book of Acts and the book of Galatians overlap. And in Acts 13 and 14, you have that first missionary journey through the regions of Galatia, where Paul is teaching, telling people that Jesus is the Messiah, and you are introduced to him and forgiveness through faith alone. And at the end of the first missionary journey, that's when he writes the book of Galatians. And the book of Galatians is all about how we're saved through faith alone in Jesus, not through works of the law. So he actually brings Titus to Jerusalem because Titus is a Gentile, and he kind of wants to see, are the church leaders, Peter, James, and John, are they going to make Titus follow the law, circumcision, and everything else? Because Titus, he's a Cretan, he's from Crete, and if there's anybody that's like furthest away from a righteous lifestyle, it would be, the Cretans. So he brings Titus there, and they don't even expect him to be saved because the leaders of the church in Jerusalem have the same gospel as Paul. It's what I call an Old Testament law-free gospel that includes Gentiles. They give him the thumbs up. There's agreement on that. So Paul makes a point. My gospel is not dependent on other people. I didn't distort scriptures, and I have the endorsement of the leadership of the church in Jerusalem. All right? Part of the issue here that we see in these stories of Scripture is what I call a made-up Messiah. The disciples, as they're walking with Jesus, had the lens that Jesus was going to conquer Rome, overthrow the system, and they would then rule with him in positions of power on his right and on his left. You remember that from the book of Mark. So the disciples never really understood what Jesus was about, even though he told them multiple times, I'm going to Jerusalem, I'm going to the cross, I'm going to be killed and mistreated and then rise from the dead. They just didn't get it. So the reason they didn't get it is because they have what I call a made-up Messiah in their mind. Their made-up Messiah was a political, powerful figure that would reinstitute Israeli national political independence. They would get control. They would get maybe revenge. This was part of their model. Now, it strikes me as very similar to our culture, right? Because so many Christians, so many evangelicals or other broadly theistic people tend to view their faith through the lens of political power. And I think this issue explains why so many Christians, however loosely you want to use the term, are melting down with the political environment we're in. They view God as a nationalistic, tribal, pro-American God. And they've wed their political power to that. And so when their political party doesn't do this or the other one does that, they melt down. Because they're just like the disciples. They view the gospel as cultural control, and their hope is in cultural control and political power. And let me ask you, is that why Jesus died the worst death a human can endure on the cross, so we can have political power? So easy to make the same mistake in our culture as they did in their culture. So we want to watch out for that, right? The other thing that I see in our culture, the other way you can make up a Messiah, the wrong Messiah, it's what has been in some academic literature called moralistic therapeutic deism. That is, God exists to make me moral, to make me nice, to help me get an advantage. I don't really have to talk to him unless I need something. He'll give me what I want. And it's basically, it turns us less of a Christ follower and makes us more narcissistic. Like it's all about me and my experience. And that is another road of a made-up Messiah. So I just want to challenge you to think, do you have any made-up messiahs in your head about political power, control, or maybe narcissistic comfort, convenience? These are errors we can make today, but we want to make sure we understand Jesus for who he really is and not for who we want to make him out to be. Because if you make up your own Messiah, sad but true, you will be disappointed with Jesus when you meet him. Because Jesus, as he really is not all about our power, control, or comfort. And so I just want to invite you to open up your expectations and your heart to follow and pursue Jesus as he is in Scripture, and all of those other desires that we have about comfort and control and influence. And some of that is good, but it's never an appropriate master, right? Good tools, horrible master. So just remember, don't be best friends with your doubt. If you're doubting who Jesus is, go to Scripture, base who Jesus is in truth in Scripture, not necessarily from the evening news, okay? So we have a couple questions we always end every sermon with, and we have emailed some of these questions out, and there's more available in a link somewhere here. And here are some questions. How do you know you're saved? Can you know you're saved? Is there something you can do that would stop your salvation? Security is in fact of what Jesus has done for us. Assurance is how I feel about that. We want to separate those and make sure we understand that, right? Did Christ die on the cross and provide enough righteousness to save you as well as keep you saved? Or is that all on us? Are we saved and lost back and forth? Important questions, and Scripture talks about that. We have a lot of questions here. Invite you to think through those. Enjoy your conversation with your family or your life group, and we will see you next time. Thanks.